When Liverpool celebrated their first Premier League title in 30 years, they did so with no fans in the stands. The 2019-20 season was almost a total washout. Matches were suspended for 3 months from March due to COVID-19, and remaining games were played in empty stadiums. The government only started letting people back in last month, and the full lifting of restrictions has been delayed by 4 weeks until July. Authorities hope the planned rollout of vaccine certificates will speed up the return of spectators.
In the case that we want to see the restoration of Premier League football, which I certainly do, then in order for that to happen, we would want to have, and indeed Premier League teams would also want to have, their stadia filled to maximum capacity. Certification may play a role in that if the alternative were, for example, to continue with social distancing.
According to research firm Deloitte, the pandemic-plagued season resulted in a pre-tax loss of $1.4 billion. Revenues declined 13% to $4.5 billion due to the absence of fans and lower sponsorship income. As earnings fell, wage expenses rose 3% as clubs outspent each other for top players. It's those same financial pressures that led England's 6 biggest clubs, together with teams from Spain and Italy, to form the breakaway European Super League. The idea was nixed just days after it was announced in April, amid anger from fans and the sport's governing bodies.
I regret it, and you can see it. It was not an easy decision to say yes, yes, no, and we're in, and we're out. But I think you can see, in terms of the timing of when we actually did commit, it tells you a lot in terms of how challenged of a decision it was and how much we struggled with that decision.
The Premier League says losses since the start of the pandemic could be as high as $2.8 billion. But officials say they plan to open stadiums at full capacity when the 2021-2022 season begins in August. That would help all clubs to win financially, regardless of who takes home the trophy. Paolo Montecillo, TRT World.
Now, TRT World senior producer Paolo Montecillo has been covering the story, and he joins us now from Istanbul with more. Welcome to the show, Paolo. Now, tell me, how much of these clubs, how much of their revenues are dependent on ticket sales, and has the pandemic forced them to change that business model in any way?
Well, Mobeen, this is the first fall in annual revenue for the English Premier League ever. So under normal times, 50% of their revenues would go to player wages. But with the pandemic, with a smaller pie that they're getting from, it's gone up to around 72%. Now, broadcast rights account for 65% of earnings. That's split equally among the 20 teams in the Premier League. So they also equally absorb the $400 million or so rebate that was given to broadcasters last year. Ticket sales account for 13% of revenues. Now, that's not exactly huge, but it's a significant amount. And of course, the most popular clubs can charge the most expensive tickets. So their losses were also disproportionately higher than that of smaller clubs. They also have bigger stadiums, so they lost more due to the pandemic and the social distancing restrictions that were in place. But smaller clubs also rely more on ticket sales because the third component of club earnings, they have less of it. That's commercial revenues. That's made up of sponsorships and merchandise sales, so sales of jerseys and stuff like that. So less popular clubs don't have as much earning potential as the bigger clubs. Now, individual clubs also have their own advantages. Take, for instance, Liverpool. They were the 2020 champions. They are owned by the Fenway Sports Group, which also owns the Boston Red Sox. That's one of the biggest teams in Major League Baseball in America. So it has a lot of experience marketing sports teams, and it also has a very nice foothold in the very lucrative US market. Now, different clubs also have different owners. Manchester City, for instance, they are the current champions. They lost more than $170 million during the 2020 season, but they're owned by the Abu Dhabi Group, so very deep pockets there. The big London club, Arsenal, it's owned by Stan Kroenke. He's a billionaire worth $10 billion, and he also married into the Walton family. That family owns the Walmart Group. They're one of the world's biggest retailers, and they're also the world's biggest company in terms of revenues. They make about $500 billion every year in sales. So different clubs can afford this financial hit differently.
But a huge hit, nevertheless. Paolo Montecillo there with his analysis on what it means, what the pandemic means for the English Premier League. Thank you so much, Paolo, for taking the time out to join us on the show.